Hi, everyone. I am Trey with the Social Work Come Up. The Social Work Come Up is a podcast about social work, all things social work. This particular series is about the clinical licensure exam, and tonight's episode is about testing while Black, race, bias, and the psychological impact. I have two guests with me today, and I'm going to turn it over to them so that they can introduce themselves. Welcome, Marie and Florinda.
Hi, Tracy. Thank you so much. I'm so excited to be here. Florinda, I'm so excited to be on the podcast with you this episode. So, my name is Marie Pinkney. I got my BSW at Norfolk State University in 2012, and then I did the Advanced Standing Program at Delaware State University, and I got that MS in 2013. So, two HBCUs. And I got my LCSW about 8 years after I finished my MSW. So I just got that in 2022. I'm really excited for this conversation this evening.
Thank you.
Awesome. I'm Florinda Scott Cobb. I received my MSW at Delaware State University in 2003 and was licensed in '07. I love the fact that I have been doing social work for some time and became licensed to really, take a deep dive at it. Um, I am very happy that this conversation is happening. And I think some of the things that really need to take place in our profession will come from other podcasts similar to this, because that opens the door for more exploration and understanding to be garnered from the information given.
Absolutely. Thank you. Thank you both for the introductions. This topic is so near and dear to my heart. In 2022, the ASWB for the first time released the pass rate, and the disparities were astounding. And so, in the agency that I was working for, I noticed that a lot of Black social workers did not have the clinical licensure designation, and how it impacts their career and it stifles their career, quite honestly. And so, I'm going to get right into the discussion for today and testing while Black, race, bias, and the psychological impact, because I've done several recordings already and I've heard from multiple social workers who talked about how it has impacted them, what it meant for them to fail numerous times, what it did to their psyche. So the first question that I have for you, and either one of you, or both, I prefer to hear from both of you. How did race shape your testing experience?
Florinda, you want to take the first shot?
For me, I think the best thing was that I went in um, to get a look at what the test looked like. Having the ability to have been a little more well read than your average African American student from a very young age, I'm an avid reader to this day, helped me to understand from a Eurocentric standpoint what I was going to be dealing with. We must take into effect and account that everything in this country comes from a Eurocentric standpoint. Therefore, when you go in to do something like a standardized test, and that's what this is to me, a standardized test, you have to keep that into consideration. So I wasn't looking to pass straight out of the gate. I just wanted to see what it looked like.
Yes.
So for me, I think I think attending HBCU was probably one of the most important parts of me being able to pass my LCSW, and I didn't know that at the time. But when I was in undergrad, there was a constant conversation around the fact that the licensure exam was biased, that it did not take into account Black experiences, Latino experiences, that it was a test created around Eurocentric thought. And I I remember knowing that before I even thought about taking the LCSW exam. Um, Interestingly enough, though, it made me disinterested in getting my license. So I mentioned that I took my exam 8 years after graduation, but I started working full time immediately after graduation. So I could have taken that exam in the 2 year time period that was necessary, but I just kept putting it off. And it was a subconscious thing that I really wasn't interested in it. But eventually, of course, we passed tiered licensure in Delaware and it became a requirement to have your license. And so I had to do it. And with that, I still couldn't find the motivation to study or prepare for the exam because I was not interested in it. And so I remember thinking to myself, kind of like you just said, Florinda, like I will just, I couldn't get myself to study it. It became like the week before the test. I hadn't picked up a book. All I had done was taken a practice test. And I was like, at this point, like I'll just take it and I'll bomb it. And at least I'll have a little bit of an understanding of what it looks like. And I'll be more prepared for the next time. But what ended up happening is because I knew that the mindset was erase your identity basically and think like a white woman, I
Yeah.
went in there with that mindset and I answered those questions in the way that I thought a white woman would answer those questions. And I aced the test on my first try. I think I passed, I think you need like a 103 and I passed with a 120, which, which, it's hard to talk about because it usually feels like a brag, but to me, I'm not bragging. I don't think that's right. I don't think it was right for me to go into an exam, erase my identity, erase my experience, put on the lens of someone else's experience, and honestly be not be forthcoming about how I would actually practice, all in the name of getting this license that I didn't even
Yeah.
really want.
It's interesting that you say that you had to think like a white woman. I've recorded several podcasts, and 90% of the time, that same comment
Mm-hmm.
has come up.
It's a theme, and it's a running theme. It's across the board. One of the things that doing some growing up outside of CONUS and then coming back to CONUS, during the educational years, there's a vast difference. In
Mm-hmm.
this country, everything is a banking indoctrination. That's what I call our education system,
Mhm.
indoctrination system. Overseas, you are taught that it is okay to think, that is okay to posit whether something is right or wrong, good or bad. What's more important is not the date that something happened, but what happened,
What happened?
what were the ramifications and repercussions of what happened,
Yeah.
and what can we learn from what happened to move forward so that we either continue to reproduce those things that happened or not do that.
I agree 100%. So, in your journey or journeys, where do you feel racism or bias showed up the most? And this is in your social work journey.
I've been really blessed to have a dynamic supervisor who is now my mentor, and has been for some years. Philip Thompson is the quintessential social worker on the Eastern Seaboard. He too is a Delaware State University graduate. It was Delaware State College back in the day. But one of the things that he instilled in me went along with how I was raised. Bias is everywhere. It's constant. You are bombarded constantly. But you need to remember, hold on to, and lean into the fact that wherever you are is where you're supposed to be, and that social work is not just a calling, it's a lifestyle.
Um, I think there's probably always those instances of covert experiences with racism. Um, I mean, I deal with it all the time in the legislature. But I think what I would rather talk about is those overt experiences,
Yeah.
because I think when they happen, you find yourself kind of like, did that really happen, or am I losing it? um, one of my first jobs, I won't name the place, because it's Delaware and everybody knows everybody. Uh, one of my first jobs, I had a supervisor who was a white man, and I worked among basically the rest of the staff were white women. And this particular supervisor was constantly kind of always doing little digs. Now, mind you, I'm fresh out of grad school and I went straight through, so I had to be 23 years old, first big girl job, just trying to do the right thing and stay employed. And I remember two distinct experiences with him. The first, when I first decided to go natural, the whole experience with Black women in our hair in the workplace. I remember being in the hallway and there's clients around, there's other um, employees around, and I remember him saying in the hallway, "What's going on with your hair?" And I
Wow.
was so taken aback. And I'm young, and by nature, I'm kind of a shy person, so I just laughed it off and kept going with my day. Um, but what that did to me, I needed to find a way to fight back. And so I remember one of the things I did was pull together a group of Black women and did a photo shoot focused on our hair as my way of kind of taking my little bit of power back.
Yes.
But I bring that up to say, like, the importance of having community as a social worker, I think, is so important, and diverse thought um, is really important. And the second instance with him, and this one is still to this day unbelievable. Um, I had taken a day off of work. I had an emergency with my pet, and I'd taken a called out, taken the day off of work, and we used to have to hand write on these slips why we were out. And so I did my slip and I put it in his mailbox, and he came into my office, just barged in. I'm in the middle of a session with a client. He walks into my office, puts the slip kind of in my face, and had written on the slip, I'm gonna it's profane language, but I'm gonna not use the whole thing. Yeah, right, N word with the A. Well, at least it didn't have the hard ER, but it was with the A.
Mm.
And then took the paper, crumpled it up, and walked back out of my office. And I'm in the middle of a session, so I have to, like, turn
Yes,
that all off, stay
yes.
present with my client, and still work at this job the next day. And those are the experiences that even sometimes when I'm talking about it, I get this feeling like, am I crazy? Did I make that up? Like, there's no way that happened. But it did, and it does. And I think that these experiences that we have as Black women in predominantly white spaces in a field that is dominated by white women, um, do not get talked about enough. And those are just those kind of really big in your face experiences. That's not even talking about the collective covert experiences that we have on a regular basis too.
Those
Absolutely.
microaggressions, those things that where questions come at you where a lot of times I wear my hair covered outside of my home.
Mm-hmm.
And I do that because I don't know what you had sneezing and coughing and carrying on. A hair carries stuff,
Mm-hmm.
so my hair generally is covered. I have waist length locks.
Mm-hmm.
And the one time I let them down, I was working in Maryland. I had someone say to me, "Oh, you do have hair." I'm serious. That's what she
Mm-hmm.
said to me. And I looked at her, I said, "Oh, and your tan is kind of fading." And I kept right on going in the opposite direction. I'm
Mm-hmm.
just not, I'm not easy to run that stuff by and not respond. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I don't
I'm
play
glad you're
that game. I don't play that game. I just don't.
I'm glad you're not. We get I think we get taught that we are supposed to be like docile in the workforce. We are supposed to be grateful that we have a job. We're not supposed to make waves. If we make waves, we're aggressive, we are boisterous, we're all of these things that if anybody else tried to defend themselves or protect themselves in those ways, they would be considered the cream of the crop type of
Yeah.
employee. But for us, it comes with all of these negative connotations that it takes I think, so long for so many of us to figure out how to break out of that and recognize that we deserve to be able to defend ourselves, that no, nobody is just going to be able to talk to us however they want. So I'm glad you got your snapback. Like,
I didn't have a choice, Marie. I did not have a choice. My thing, the same with working here in the state of Delaware. I
mhm,
was called an angry black woman, and I said, "Well, darling, I'm ready for my close up. Could you give me my Oscar?"
Yeah.
Aggression and assertiveness are two different things.
mhm,
And we spend a lot of time as professional black women explaining that difference to
mhm.
people who are committed to
To
misunderstanding us.
misunderstanding us, absolutely.
Wow. So deep. So tell me this, how did systemic inequity show up?
Pay, expectations in reference to last minute projects,
Yes.
being expected to leave a sick kid. I've had that experience. I don't care that my daughter was 35. She had major surgery.
Mhm,
Well, who's going to present? I've already taken care of that. And if you have read your email, you would see who's going to do what.
mhm,
I felt obligated to find somebody to step into my spot, do the presentation that I was supposed to do, because I knew I wasn't leaving Baltimore. It's that simple.
mhm,
If I can put it together, send it to my administrative assistant, who then puts together the PowerPoint, excuse me, what's the problem? I got the time. I've been with the state of Delaware over 20 years at that point.
mhm. That
Yeah.
expectation that you're going to always go above and beyond. Mhm, and I mean, I think that traces back to we can trace that back to enslavement and the idea that the black woman is the mammy, right? Like, you're
Yes.
supposed to, you always have to be the one. I definitely agree with pay inequity. Um, I think I'll let Florinda's answer stand because I think that those are the best experiences or examples.
Yeah. And I want to add a little bit to that. In one of my first social work jobs in the field, I was tasked with home visits. And it seemed that my supervisor always gave me the home visits. She assumed that because, the melanin, I'm just going to put it out there, that she would send me to, she says, you can do the ones in the city and we'll have, we'll just say Amy do the ones down in Newark. Why is Amy in Newark and why am I doing the ones in the city?
Exactly.
And so I found for about a year, she was always giving me the tasks that were more quote unquote in urban areas. And she was like, you just handle them so well and you have a personality that can adapt to any situation.
Even if that's true, why would it not behoove Amy to learn how to work with other clientele?
Because this is social work, right?
That
Exactly.
goes right back to what we said about how the test is, right? Like, that's where these mindsets come from.
Exactly, exactly. And speaking about the test, the next question, and you answered it a little bit already. What did you have to do or what did you have to change to pass the exam? And so, Marie, I heard from you that, you had to change your mindset and think like a middle aged white woman. Florinda, what did you have to change in order to pass the exam?
A basic core belief.
Mm,
Generally, African Americans are taught the difference between right and wrong. White people are taught what's best in that situation.
mhm,
Once I changed that mindset and began to study with that mindset in place, I was like, oh, okay, I'm good. I
mhm,
got this. I lost anxiety. I lost like, oh my God, what if I don't pass? This is my third time taking it. Oh my God, what if I don't pass? The whole 9 yards. I ordered the AATBS packet for clinical social work. And when I changed that mindset and began to read those questions, I could see the difference
mhm,
from the way I was taught. You either do something because it's right or wrong. You do not, there's no middle ground.
Most.
You know, they're the opposite. I mean, look at our situation today.
Yeah, yeah. So, in terms of the ASWB, and that's the Association of Social Work Boards, what can they do better to ensure that the exam bias is eradicated? And before you answer that, the ASWB paid for a group of researchers to try to figure out why the disparities exist. And so they came back with every reason under the sun, but nowhere in their research did they address exam bias. They talked about socioeconomic factors. They talked about, possible MSW education, but they didn't talk about the bias in the exam. And so my question is, what do you think that the ASWB can do better to ensure that exam bias is eradicated?
Stop. Stop going around the drain, because ultimately you're going to get sucked in. It's just that simple. You can't skirt the drain. You can't keep doing that. You have to make a choice. The choice has to be to deal with what the actuality is. There is some bias, and playing with words like diversity and inclusion and all of that is not the answer. You have to delve into the situation. You have to learn and ask the people, listen to the people who are giving you the answers, and then make application. As we've said in the military, applicability in this case is a no go, because you haven't done what you needed to do in order to rectify, resolve, whatever you want to call it, the issue.
I think you said the answer, Tracy. Talk about exam bias. I think
Yeah,
that's the answer. I would be really interested to even to go a step further though, right? Because we know that there is bias even in the way that research is done and research is conducted. And so if you're not going into it with the intention of addressing that bias and eradicating it, you're already going to be skewed in the outcomes that you get. Um, so there needs to be diversity in the research team. There needs to be focus groups to be able to talk to people about what is your experience as a social worker, right? How do you think about race and how does it show up in the work that you do? Um, if you're not talking directly about race, just because you're not talking about it doesn't mean it goes away. And so it needs to be front and center in the conversation. But we're this is not uncommon. Like the same, we know the same thing when we're talking about Black maternal health, right? Like one of the number one reasons that there's such a racial disparity is because of discrimination and racism in healthcare experiences for Black women, and we've done looked at so many ways to address that, but we're not looking directly at how racism shows up in healthcare and
exactly.
directly doing things to eradicate that. And so you have to talk about the issue. If you're being silent on the issue is not going anywhere. You're just not talking about it.
And that's for me, that's where my capstone is headed. um it has to start in the medical school.
Absolutely.
We cannot, we can't take this thing down without understanding that we have to go from cultural competency to cultural humility.
Yeah,
And it has to start in medical school, because those hegemonic narratives are what you're teaching people, and they're just wrong.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
say it again for people in the back. It's just wrong.
That's
Oh
right.
my goodness. And so, in that same vein, what do you think, or what conversations do you believe that the profession is avoiding? What is social work
Extrapolation
avoiding?
of extrapolation of critical race theory, because when you apply critical race theory to what we're talking about right here right now, that's going to open some doors that people don't want to look into. I'm sorry you don't want to look into it, but boo boo kitty, you messed up. not us. We are dealing on a daily basis with the faux pas, and I'm being politically correct, which I don't do very well, that you have done. See, the stain is still there. You can't erase it. You can't do anything about it without first recognizing the wrong that was done.
Mhm. Yeah, I agree with that. I think there is a I think when social work is practiced by Black practitioners, we bring in our ideology of community first. And I think that comes natural to
Yes,
us, which is
yes,
why you don't see it reflected in the exam, um,
yes.
because that ideological experience of ours is just ingrained in us, and so it shows up in our practice. I think that should be taught. It should be a part of the curriculum.
Very
At,
much so.
at Dell State's MSW program, the Black perspective was a
Thank you.
killer,
Thank you.
right? It is one of the pillars in the program,
Yes, it
and
is.
that should not be exceptional, right? Even if you're too uncomfortable to call it the Black perspective, even if critical race theory, somebody mentions that, people are gonna like lose their minds and go crazy.
Mhm.
Some semblance of community first, of caretaking, is really important. Um, that same job that I mentioned, where those ridiculous things happened, uh, we were working with young people, and we had these are young people who are in crisis, and sometimes those teenagers just needed a hug. One of the first things that you get taught in social work school is that you're not supposed to touch people.
Yeah.
That doesn't work for teenagers. That textbook thought does not work for if a teenager. First of all, if a teenager wants a hug from you, you are the greatest thing walking. You should pat yourself on the back, because
Thank
teenagers are sometimes so moody that or too cool to hug. So what is it doing to the psyche of this client if they have created a level of vulnerability with you, but you say, "Oh no, the book says I can't do that." And we had a person that worked there, one of the few men who came and went. He was collecting his hours for his PhD. We had a group meeting, and I remember he would constantly address the fact that there were some of us that would hug the kids, the clients. And I remember thinking, like, how am I going to survive in this field when there's something as basic as fulfilling a client's need for emotional or for physical touch or insecurity? How do I honor that when I know that that is just not who I am as a person? Um, so that's my answer.
I
you.
love
I
that.
agree.
I absolutely agree. I'm from the old school of social work. And so the human touch is very, very, very important. This conversation is so robust and we could go on forever and ever. We might have to have a part two. Um, but in closing, I have a question that I ask every guest on this show, and each one of you could answer. So, if there was one gem or nugget that you could drop on um, a social worker, a young black social worker, or not even young, a social worker, a black social worker looking to take the clinical licensure exam, what advice or what nugget would you want to leave with them?
This is mm, go ahead, Florinda.
I'm still thinking.
I feel very guilty about this, so I'm going to try to explain it the best way I can. But until the exam is fixed, and while you're just focused on trying to get that license to get that job for the hour and a half that the test is, put aside your core beliefs long enough to pass the test, then get your license and go fight against that. go fight against the next person having to do that. I think as Black women, we have mastered being being chameleons and having to show up in spaces in ways that make people feel comfortable
Yeah.
or make people feel less intimidated by us. And by no means do I think that we should have to keep doing that.
And it's exhausting.
It's horribly exhausting.
Yeah.
And so I do think that there are times for our safety, whether it's economic safety, physical safety, that it is important, but it's more important to not get consumed by it, to have a community to support you through it, and then to fight against it once you are in a place where your feet are on steady ground.
I wholeheartedly concur, I'm sorry, with Marie. However, this may sound a little strange, but it's how I made it through.
Mhm.
Lean into your supervision.
Mhm.
You're going to get the underpinnings in class. Social work cannot be taught via computer. I'm sorry. Doesn't fly with me, never will, not interested. There are behaviors that have to be modeled in order to learn them and to be able to practice them where people can watch you do that. Your supervision is where the icing goes on the cake. And I would tell that person, I don't care who you get for your supervisor, you must make sure that that person is concrete,
Yeah,
understands what it is you're doing, has the capacity to extrapolate information to you in a way that you can use it, and has to be someone who is not just in it for the money.
yeah.
That part. Well
That's
said. Well said. Wow. Thank you both so much for coming on. You have been such a godsend to me. This is one of my favorite episodes, one of my favorite topics. And like I said, I might have to do a part two and bring you back on.
I got you.
happily.
Thank you so much. Yes, and until the next time, be well.
You too.
Ladies, have a good one.
Bye, Marie.